Hello my crafty friends, this is Monica from Allsewpetite. Welcome to my channel. In this tutorial I will demonstrate how to make this zipper pouch using Isabella pouch pattern. This is a fairly quick project, but also very addictive. Just ask any of my pattern testers. If you are familiar with sewing zippers and box corners, then you should have no problem making the Isabella pouch with me today. The pattern features a top zipper closure, and you can use a single or double pull zipper here. The main compartment is fully lined, and I would recommend using a waterproof fabric to make it easier to clean. There are handles on each side of the zipper for ease of carrying, external zipper pockets so you can keep all your smaller items separately, are located both on the front and back of your pouch. Isabella pouch would look great on your dressing table, but is also spacious enough if you need to pack your skincare, cosmetics and more for a trip away. Head over to my website to get the Isabella pouch pattern and let's get sewing. I will include the link to the pattern and all supplies I used in this tutorial in the description box below. I also divided this video tutorial into chapters, so if you only want to watch a specific part, it is easier to find. If you want to learn how to make the Isabella pouch with me, then keep on watching. If you want to find out exactly how to print and assemble the pattern, then check out my other video where I explain everything in more details. On the first page of the pattern, you will find a pattern layout. Some pattern pieces are larger than one page, and you will have to assemble multiple pages together. Other pattern pieces are smaller enough to fit on one page, so you can cut them out right away. At first, only print the page with the Test Me calibration square and measure it to check if your printer settings are correct. Some pattern pieces are oddly shaped, so you will have to print them out, but others are just a different size of rectangles, so if you want to save on a printer paper and ink, you can use measurements given in the sewing instructions. Once you print the pattern, locate the triangles with the same letter and numbers and align them together. It is easier if you trim off the side and bottom page margin first. When you assemble the entire pattern piece, you can cut it out. On the last page of the sewing instructions, you will also find labels for individual pattern pieces. So you can print that page as well, cut the individual labels, and once you cut your fabric, you can use them to label your pattern pieces. To complete today's project, you will need external and lining fabric. For my external fabric, I am going to mix this lovely pink faux leather with this printed cork fabric. For the lining, I am using this nice and sturdy waterproof canvas. If you are using a lightweight fabric or fabric that stretch or have a tendency to fray a lot, you might want to fuse some woven interfacing to the wrong side of the fabric. To create more structured Isabella pouch, you can use some stabilizers, such as fusible fleece or Decovil light. Additionally, you also need a number 5 zipper for the main compartment with 1 or 2 zipper pulls and 2 shorter number 5 zippers for the external pockets, a ruler to take some measurements, your favorite marking tools. This is optional, but you might want to add a metal tag on the outside or a woven care label to the inside of your pouch. You might also need a hand needle, thread and a thimble to close the opening in the lining, a seam ripper in case if something goes wrong. An awl and hem jumper are useful tools when sewing bulky seams. You will need some scissors and snips, clips to hold everything together. A corner shaper is useful, and also a double-sided tape. Cut 2 zipper pockets from your external fabric and your lining fabric, 4 side panels from the external fabric, 2 handles from the external fabric, 1 base from the external fabric, 2 top panels from the external fabric, 2 pocket linings from your lining fabric, and 1 front lining and back lining pieces from the lining fabric. On the wrong side of the handle, draw a line in the middle. If you are working with difficult to press fabric, use a double-sided tape and apply it on each side of the line. Remove the plastic cover and fold the edge towards the line. Press it with your fingers and repeat on the other side. Now you can fold the handle in half and line up those folded edges. Use clips to hold everything in place. When you are ready, take it to the machine and stitch close to the edge along both sides. But first repeat the steps on the other handle. After you've made your handles, take the base panel and we're going to measure 2.5 centimeters from each shirt side. That's where the handles will be placed. Take one of the handles and check on which side the folded edges meet. You want to make sure those edges face towards the center of the base panel. Then line up the short edges below the markings and clip it in place. Then repeat on the other side. When you are ready, baste both handles about 5 millimeters from the edge. Take one external zipper pocket and one of your shorter zippers, and we're going to place the zipper facing down along the top edge. But first you need to decide which way you want the zipper to open. I like my zippers to open from left to right. So double check if that's correct and line it up at the top edge. Then clip it in place. I'm going to baste the zipper about 2 millimeters from the edge, but first we can prep the other pocket. Once you have the zipper basted, take the zipper pocket lining piece and with right side facing down, place it on top of the pocket. Line it up and pin it together. We're going to sew the seam using 7 mm seam allowance. Now you can press the seam flat. I like to do it in 2 stages. First, press the seam allowance to one side, then bring the pieces wrong sides together and press the seam flat. I like to use my press cloth to protect the cork from damage. Line it up on all sides and pin it in place. And then top stitch along the zipper and baste all remaining sides. Flip the pocket to the other side, then take the pocket lining piece and with the right side facing down, place it on top, line it up on all sides and pin it in place. When ready, take it to the machine and baste on all sides. Repeat for the other pocket. You can trim off the excess zipper. Take one of your side panels and with right sides together, place it on top of the zipper pocket. Line it up along the top and side edges and pin it in place. Don't worry if your pocket is longer, we're going to trim it off later on. Now take the second side panel and line it up on the other side of your pocket. Then repeat for the remaining pocket and side panels. When ready, we're going to stitch all 4 seams using 1 centimeter seam allowance. If you want, you can take the panels to the pressing station now and press the seam allowance towards the side panels. After that, we're going to top stitch the side panels about 5 mm from the seam line. Once you have the side panels top stitch, you can trim the excess fabric in the middle. Mine is a bit wonky, so I will use a ruler to draw a straight line to make sure I trim the right amount. If you decided to stabilize your pouch, now is the time to add the front and back stabilizer pieces to the wrong side of the front and back panels. So take it to the pressing station and fuse it together. Otherwise, you can just base the stabilizer around all sides. Take one of the top panels and with right side facing down, place it on top of the front piece. Line it up along the top edge and pin it together. We're going to sew the seam using 7mm seam allowance. But first you can pin the other top panel to your back piece. After you've sewn the seams, you can take them to the pressing station, open the panels and press the seam allowance towards the top panels. Then you can top stitch along the seam. Now you can take the base panel and we're going to line up the bottom edge of the front piece along that long edge. The right sides should be facing each other and the front panel should fit perfectly. We're going to sew the seam using 1 cm seam allowance, but first I'm going to pin the back panel on the other side so I can stitch both seams at the same time. Once you have both sides stitched, open the panel, press the seam allowance towards the base and top stitch along the seam. Take the long zipper and place it facing down along the top panel. You should leave a zipper tail at the end. Line it up and pin it together. If you are working with a single pull zipper, you will need to decide which way you want the zipper to open, in the same way you've done it for the pockets. Now you can base the zipper 2 mm from the edge. Take one of the lining pieces and with right side facing down, line it up along the zipper. Pin it in place and sew the seam using 7mm seam allowance. After you've sewn the seam, open the panels and press the seam flat. I can't really press the faux leather fabric, so we'll carefully only press the lining just to flatten the seam as much as I can. If you can press your fabric, place both panels wrong sides together, line it up, and then you can press the seam flat. When you are ready, take it to the machine and top stitch along the zipper, then you can base the shorter sides. Now bring the other top panel, line it up on the other side of the zipper, and pin everything together. You can again baste the seam, otherwise take the remaining lining piece. As you see, I've basted a woven label to the right side of the fabric. You can flip the entire pouch over to the other side, and with right sides together, place that lining on top and pin it to the zipper. Again, we're going to sew the seam using 7mm seam allowance. Flip the lining piece away from the zipper and press the seam. Now the things get a little bit more difficult because we need to top stitch the seam. And you will have to open the zipper to make this process easier. You can use a safety pin if you worry about losing your zipper pull. If you have a zipper with a single zipper pull, you should be able to just top stitch with your zipper completely open. That is why we left a zipper tail at the end. If, like me, you are working with a continuous zipper, just remove your zipper pulls so you can open the pouch and lay it flat. This way you can easily top stitch along the zipper and then baste both short sides. When you are ready, insert both zipper pulls back on the zipper. Now you can tack the zipper on both sides. Trim off the zipper tail. Open the zipper and turn your pouch inside out. Next, you're going to line up the long side of the lining pieces and pin them together. We're going to sew the seam using 1 cm seam allowance, but remember to leave an opening in the middle. I like to draw 2 lines so I don't forget it. Next, open the seam allowance and press it flat. Bring the zipper between the lining and the external panels, because we're going to line up the short sides. Here is the external side, and this is the lining side. First, we're going to line up the external sides. Just make sure to keep the handle out of the way. You can see that our pouch is starting to take its shape. Now, grab the lining, and we're going to line it up on the other side. Move all your clips to hold all the pieces and then repeat on the other side of the pouch. When you clip both seams, this is how it should look like. Now we're going to take our Isabella pouch and sew both seams using 1 cm seam allowance. Now we can work on side seams. However, we're going to tackle one seam at a time. If you are familiar with making box corners, then this step shouldn't be confusing. So pinch the fabric at the base corner, line up the side edges and pin it together. As you go along, you're going to have to maneuver the fabric out of the way, so just take your time. You will notice that the seam allowance naturally wants to go towards the base, and that is where we have to bring the lining. Be careful when pinning the fabric and keep the lining out of the way. I found it easier if I lay the side seam flat on the table, then carefully bring the lining over to this side. Box the corners and clip the edges along the seam. You should have the seams clipped just like that. If you are comfortable, you can line up the lining and external seams, just like that. Move the clips to hold everything together, and then sew the seam as one. However, it might be easier if you baste every single seam separately beforehand. After you basted the seams, you need to bring the lining and external pieces together, line them up, and hold it with clips. Now we can sew this first side seam using 1 cm seam allowance. Once you have the first side seam stitched, you're going to repeat the process for the second side seam. Again, take your time and maneuver the fabric out of the way so you can line up the side edges. Clip the external pieces first, then work on the lining. You can baste the seams separately the same way you've done previously. Otherwise, line up the seams and move your clips to hold everything together. If your pouch looks like this, go ahead and sew the second side seam using 1 cm seam allowance. I have 2 side seams completed. To finish the remaining 2 seams, we need to carefully turn the pouch to the other side. When you access the remaining side seams, again work on 1 seam at a time till you finish all 4 side seams. When all 4 side seams are completed, turn the pouch right side out through the opening in the lining. Make your corners neat and double check if everything looks okay. If you are happy with everything, turn the Isabella pouch inside out because we need to close the opening in the lining. Line up both folded edges together and use clips to hold them in place. You can finish the seam by stitching close to the edge, or take a thread and a hand needle and close the opening using a ladder stitch. Even though it is more time consuming, I prefer to do it by hand because when finished, the seam lays nice and flat inside the pouch. It is a much cleaner look in my opinion. Turn your Isabella pouch right side out and give it a final press if necessary. Congratulations, you completed the project. Don't forget to like this video if you found this tutorial helpful, and also subscribe to my channel for a similar content. See you next time. Stay crafty, friends!